Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel many a time before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, and these guys are probably one of my most reviewed breweries here on the channel, come to think of it. That said, the style that we're having a look at today is one that I've never had from them before. It's a style that I always really liked, and it was very popular maybe about 6-7 years ago, something like that. But in recent years it seemed to all but disappear, but there's been a little bit of a kind of mini resurgence of sorts over the last couple of months, and I have to say I'm quite happy about that. It is nice to have a few different examples of this style to review for you here again on the channel. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's a good beer, hopefully you guys enjoy it, and I hope it's a very nice example of this style as well. So yeah, let's go for it then. So for this review we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again. Göteborg, as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get your Gothenburg catchphrase in with the Gothenburg beers because it's just channel tradition these days, as those of you who are regulars will know. But for this review we are going to return to Stigbergets Bryggeri, who are probably one of the best known Swedish craft breweries these days. But this particular beer is called the Batcat. It comes in at 7% ABV, and this one is a black IPA. So yeah, this beer was released a couple of months ago for the first time through Stigbergets, but it was a Gothenburg only release from what I understand. I did try to order this one when it was first released. I think that might have been back in like November of 2020 or something like that it was first released, but it said you couldn't order it unless you were actually in one of the Gothenburg stores. But one of the stores away over in the east of Skåne had it for some reason. But yeah, they re-released it as part of the Tillfälligt assortment in February, I think in late February of 2021, and I'm glad that I'm able to review it for you here. My very first black IPA from these guys, and as I said earlier, this is a style that I've always really enjoyed. Another thing to note about this particular style, I would say, is that if you're watching from Sweden or from Denmark or Europe, I guess, Total have just re-released the black salts and body malts, and for me that is the kind of archetypical black IPA. It's one of the best ones, probably the best one I've ever reviewed. I think it's going to be released through the Local Småskalig assortment here in Sweden through Systembolaget on the 1st of April, so keep your eyes peeled for that, but you can get it through Total's web shop as well. For me, that one is the pinnacle of black IPAs, so make sure you try that one if you get the chance. But Stigbergets, of course, have made their name over the years for the kind of New England hazy style IPAs, so I'm really curious to see how they interpret a black IPA. So fingers crossed, as I said, that this is a good beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. Let's go for it. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Stigbergets Bryggeri before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Stigbergets Bryggeri once again, then on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you many a time, Stigbergets are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded by Nils Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson. So the pair own two bars that share the one kitchen. This is Bar Kino and Hagabjörn's Cafe, which can be found on Linnegatan in the city, and they both opened back in 2007. The building itself is actually an independent cinema, and I had no idea about this until I actually went to visit it. So if you want a little look at what the place looks like, go and check my out and about video that I did. That was filmed in about October of 2019. if I remember rightly. So yeah, do go and check that one out, and you can see most of it was filmed in the bar Kino in the basement, and then the Hagabion's Cafe is in the lobby. But there's an independent cinema there, lots of really interesting films, and it is definitely worth going and checking out. But originally the idea that Niels and Richard had was that they wanted to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars, but this led to them kegging the beers and then selling it on to other pubs, and eventually they started bottling the beers beginning in November of 2014. The original beers that they produced were mainly English and German styles, but of course they really started to make their name well known when they focused on the more hoppy American styles of beer. The original head brewer was Ole Anderson, and he is one of the co-owners of OO Brewing these days. He stayed with them until April of 2017, at which point he was replaced for a short period by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the vice presidents at Three Floyds over in Indiana. Munster in Indiana, close to Chicago over in America, and yeah, he was only with them for like 3 months or something like that. But soon after that they moved to a brewery at Partihalana, where they were brewing 5,000 litre batches at a time, and they began working on some sour beers during their time in that brewery as well. They also converted from using the 330ml bottles to the 440ml cans. They also sell some of their special beers in the very thin 330ml cans, and this has meant that they've been able to export their stuff a lot more. But these days they've got a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown over in London in England, and also Lucas Monroyd, who used to be involved with All In Brewing, and they're one of the numerous gypsy breweries that you'll find in the Gothenburg area. But as of summer 2020, they've just moved into a new brewery in Ringen, and they're considering brewing some lambic beer there as well, apparently. And from the article that I read, they're talking about this brewery being like an experience brewery. They're saying that there's potentially facilities for a bar and swimming there too. So I think when they get that up and running, hopefully towards the end of 2021, I think maybe by the looks of things, I think summer 2021 is going to be a little bit early, but yeah, fingers crossed they can get things up and running soon, and we can go and have a little look and film an out and about video at Stigbergets. It would be quite cool to get Niels and Richard on the channel for a Meet the Brewery segment, but we'll see about that at some point. But they opened up a bar in Stockholm in April of 2020, and they also opened up a folköl shop in Gothenburg as well. For those of you that don't know, folköl in Sweden is any beer that is 3.5% or below. That means it can be sold in the supermarkets as opposed to the state-owned alcohol monopoly Systembolaget. But as of March 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 100 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. In recent times they've been producing a few different German lagers and things like that, which have been really interesting. I've reviewed the 2 of those that have come out so far, and I think there's another 2 coming out in April, so you'll see those. But they are starting to produce a few different things. I've got a rye IPA to take a look at from these guys as well, but as I've mentioned to you on numerous occasions, this brewery are most well known for their hazy New England IPAs. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Stigbergets for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. Really curious about this one. So there you can see on the artwork, there's the Batcat, and I think, you know, the light and the camera is just playing havoc with this a little bit because the can is a wee bit shiny. It's just kind of how it goes sometimes. But yeah, this one, as I mentioned to you earlier, is a black IPA, 7% ABV. This one is hopped with Citra, Columbus and Chinook, from what I understand. But yeah, this beer was released in the Tillfällig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden. It was either late February that they re-released it, or it was sometime earlier on in March. I've had this beer sitting in my fridge for maybe about 2-3 weeks, something like that, but I can't remember exactly what date this one was released. But I think I paid about 45 Swedish kroners for this, which is kind of standard for a 440ml IPA. So yeah, about €4.50, £4 sterling, about $5, $5.25 American, just to give you guys a little bit of a currency translation. But as I said, my very first black IPA from Stigbergets, and I'm very curious to see how it turns out, and I'm glad that we're seeing more and more black IPAs coming out. I've got another couple of black IPAs to review this month, one from Beerbibliotek and one from Akia Bryghus in Kungsbacka as well. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. I'm very, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. And I'll tell you straight away, when you open it, it smells very, very nice. So yeah, I have to admit, I think the newer black IPAs that I've tried have come across as really nice and smooth. And one of the things that I found with black IPAs in the past, I did tend to prefer the Imperial ones because they had a little bit more sweetness and stuff to them. I think this is a style that benefits from a little bit of malty sweetness rather than being really kind of harsh and bitter in the malty side of things. But a lot of the newer ones seem to have that nice kind of smoothness to them. So yeah, I think the black IPA is a style that does have the potential to gain a lot of popularity again. I always used to enjoy it, and as I say, I'm very happy to see that it's back here. But interestingly, it says on the side that this one has oats in it as well, so I think the oaty smoothness can benefit these beers too. So maybe they're putting a little bit of the New England principles that have come in over the last years into this as well, which might well not be a bad thing. But yeah, as you can see with this beer then, and as you'd expect from a black IPA, it's poured a lovely, what would we say, that's a dark sort of ebony kind of colour, I would say. I always like comparing these darker beers to different woods. You know, I play Spanish guitar, I play flamenco guitar, and you know, that's just what it reminds me of. Every beer tuber has their own kind of frame of reference, if you like. But you can see that when we poured this beer, it has a solid finger of a frothy, I would say light sort of mocha beige head. That's going to fade away to be a thin foamy layer over time though, but it does have a nice kind of dense froth with small bubbles. So it will stick around for a little while. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, and if I shine the light through it, it does have a little touch of a Coca-Cola, Pepsi Max kind of coloured edge to it. But yeah, I do like how it appears in this, but there's nothing particularly surprising about that when you consider what style of beer it is. So yeah, it looks very, very nice for a black IPA, and it looks pretty much as you would expect. So let's move on to the aroma then and see how we get on with this one. I'm very curious about this beer, I have to say. It does smell very nice. It does smell very, very nice. Yeah, it's kind of got everything you'd want. And it comes across really, really smoothly. So yeah, where do we start? So with this beer then, you can smell a bit of that kind of toasty, well-fired bread crust in the backbone. I do wonder what malts they use in these days. I remember Carafa was always a really nice malt to use in these black IPAs. If you could pair a bit of Weirmann Carafa with a bit of caramel and a bit of Munich malt and things like that, that was something that was always going to give you a really nice base. Maris Otter could always give you a really nice little bit of sweetness in black IPAs as well. What I like is just a nice kind of smooth roasty quality, a bit of breadiness, and then a bit of a kind of caramelly biscuity sweetness. That's for me what makes a really good black IPA. And of course they're using the oats. It seems that they're using the oats in them these days just to smoothen them out even further. So yeah, this one for me I think will be, just going by the aroma, I think I'm going to enjoy this one. If the aroma translates well into the flavour, then I think we're in for a bit of a treat. Let's just say that. But yeah, straight away with this beer then, you can smell that toasty, well-fired, bread crusty backbone to this one. I'm not sure if it's Carafa because it doesn't seem quite harsh enough almost, but then again, the oats will be doing something to kind of smoothen the beer out, if you like. So yeah, bit of a toasty, well-fired bread crust in there. You get a nice sort of wholemealy, almost slightly rye type bread quality from this one. I don't think this beer didn't have rye in it on the ingredients list, but the bready notes that you get almost smell a little bit sweet in the way that a German rye bread can, for example. But yeah, the more that you smell of it, it does in fairness become a little bit more grainy. So there's definitely, yeah, toasty, well-fired bread crust, little bit of a kind of wholemealy sort of little bit of a wholemealy rye bready sort of quality coming out of this one, and I think that suits it quite nicely. There's definitely a bit of brown sugar in here for sure. There's a nice sweet caramelly note, which I really like. There's a good little bit of a kind of more McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing in there as well, which I really like. So yeah, it has got that element of sweetness that I look for, and a bit of the biscuity thing that I like as well. I would say that the brown sugars in this beer, there is an element of toastiness to them, but I would say that it's more an oily kind of sweet character that you get out of the beer. There are one or two little elements of woody undertone in there as well, but not too much. I mean, it is more a kind of bready, roasty, toasty, bread crusty kind of beer that you're getting out of this one with a bit of a malty sweetness, but it's got everything that you would expect from the malty side of a black IPA. As I say, I suspect the smoothness in this one is coming from the oats, and we might be able to pick up some of that from some of the little things in the flavour. But yeah, malty wise, it has everything that you would want, and it's really nicely balanced between sweetness, smoothness, and a little bit of toastiness. So yeah, interesting. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, you do get a little touch of earthiness out of this one for sure. Yeah, it has got a really nice kind of toasty, the sort of toastiness that you get out of this beer builds a good little bridge with the earthiness that the beer has, but for me it's got quite a nice big floral and aromatic. Quite a nice big floral and aromatic side of things to it as well. I wouldn't quite go as far as saying this beer has a really dominating piney resin. You do get a little bit of that. Chinook, of course, there's a key difference for me between Chinook and Columbus. Columbus has always struck me as a more kind of spicy, floral aromatic hop, if that makes sense, whereas Chinook's always been more about the kind of danker pine resins, and you get a little bit of both out of this one, but I think the Chinook sort of sits underneath and a little bit more and comes across as a little bit more subtle, if you like, than the Columbus in this one. I think this beer, in terms of the green component, really leans a bit more towards the floral end of the spectrum, and you do get a bit of that spice out of it. But yeah, in the on the grassy side of things, it does actually have a little bit of zestiness to it, which is quite interesting. Not something that you would commonly expect from one of these beers. But the grassy zestiness you get out of this is quite nice, and it just adds a little bit more sort of depth to the beer, if you like. But yeah, on the fruity side of things then, to kind of round off the aroma, for me this has a really interesting fruity character to it. So Citra, of course, normally in a regular IPA we would associate it with mango and, you know, a little bit of a citrusy kind of vibe. But in this one, it really the whole beer comes across as quite red and fruity, but that's not uncommon with a dark malt base, of course. Chinook is going to contribute a little bit of the red fruit that you're getting in this one, and you do get a nice little bit of a kind of plummy juiciness to it, and a wee bit of a kind of figgy quality as well. So there's a little bit of an oily plummy note in there, there's a little bit of a juicier figgy note. I would suspect that those are coming from a mix of Citra, because Citra can give you a wee bit of that grapefruity sort of thing as well, and the Chinook. It does have, I mean, there is a wee element, you can pick up a little bit of the kind of mango-y notes out of it, but I'm getting a wee bit of a kind of blackcurranty blackberry sort of vibe out of this beer as well. Yeah, one thing I would love to try, come to think of it, would be a black IPA with Eureka in it. It's an American hop that is known for its berry components. I think Enigma from Australia could be interesting as well. That's got a sort of Nelson Sauvigny type quality to it, but it's also got a bit of a kind of red currant, red berry sort of thing too. Those two hops could be really interesting for a black IPA. But anyway, we're getting off topic, but you get a lovely, yeah, a little bit of black curranty, a little bit of a sharper blackberry, some figs, plums, a wee bit of a sharper raisin, and then you can pick out just a little bit of that mango-y note from the Citra as well. But the aroma of this beer is really, pardon me, getting a bit of a dry throat, but the aroma of this beer is very, very nice. But if that translates into the flavour, I think we're in for a little bit of a treat, but we need to taste this one now, my throat's going. But yeah, this one is the Batcat 7% black IPA from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg on the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck in. Very curious about this. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, it's a pretty solid effort, I have to say. Yeah, I like this one. Now I'm curious because the first thing that strikes me about it is that it's very, very smooth, and I don't remember. I don't remember black IPAs ever being quite as smooth as this. I do remember them being slightly more kind of bitter in the malt base, but again, this style has maybe just evolved a little bit because of the New England haze craze, and maybe that's the reason. You've got oats in this beer, of course, as well, which I don't believe were ever really used in black IPAs back in, 2013, 2014. So maybe beer, generally speaking, is getting smoother almost. But it's a really nice and easy drinking black IPA, this one. And I think probably using the oats in this beer is a way to help it maybe maintain like a sort of maintain a level of popularity. So hopefully this time the beers are here to stay, actually. So yeah, because I did find that black IPAs, if you got a good one, it tended to be very good, but some of them could just be a little bit too bitter in the malt base. And I always used to say that I preferred them as imperials, because then you had a sweeter element to the malt base. And I think with the black IPA, I think the balance in the malt base is critical for having a good example of the style. So the oats are adding another dimension to this style that I think is very, very interesting. So yeah, I do like this though. I think this is a nice first go at black IPA from Stigbergets. The question, of course, will be, is this one of the best beers that they've done? It's not one of the most striking ones I've had from Stigbergets, I'll say that straight away. But is it solid? Yep. And I mean, that's what we expect from Stigbergets these days. I think, as far as I know, this is the first black IPA that they've done. I'm sure they'll play around with this beer and this style over the next few years, and they'll constantly improve it. That's what Stigbergets seem to do. So I'm curious to see what later black IPAs are like. But in the meantime, I think this one is pretty solid for a first go, if you like. I will enjoy drinking this one for sure. But yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this beer then and just see how we get on. The interesting thing as well is I'm noticing that the more that I drink of it, the more kind of juicy it gets. So I can really appreciate that about this beer as well. But yeah, straight away across the middle of your palate, you'll feel that nice sort of bread crusty backbone there. You can feel just a little bit that toasty, well-fired bread crusty quality forming the base of that middle third of your palate. On top of that, you can feel a nice sort of wholemealy, brown bready sort of thing. I wouldn't say that it's a rye bread in this beer. From the aroma, it gave the impression of being a rye bread, but it's not. It is more of just a wholemealy brown bread. But you can really feel the oats sitting on top of that brown bready quality and just smoothing out the whole beer. This is a very, very smooth black IPA from in comparison with other ones that I've had. So yeah, it's interesting from that point of things. And as I say, I do think this is a bit of an evolution of the black IPA style. So yeah, maybe we're going to get a New England black IPA and a West Coast black IPA. Who knows? New England is all about the oats. But yeah, very, very smooth black IPA, this one. But yeah, I think if we are going to get that sort of oaty based New England, if we're going to get that more oaty based black IPA, I think these ones have it's got a really good potential actually. So yeah, I think we've covered the base layer of the beer fairly well. If you go to the front corners of your palate, then move diagonally back, you will get a few woody undertones to the beer, which is quite nice. But then in the centre of your palate, you can feel that, if you go down the kind of centre line of your tongue in that middle third of your palate, you can feel the smoothness of the oats, and you do get a little bit of sweetness from the oats the further you go into the aftertaste. For me though, this one, it does have a little bit of brown sugar. You get a bit of a straight up sweet caramel right in the middle of your palate, and as you move out from the middle of your palate, you start to get a bit of a kind of Werther's Original butter candy type thing, and beyond that, there is just a little touch of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of thing, but I would say that that's quite minimal until you progress into the aftertaste. So yeah, I do like how that side of things goes together. But yeah, the malty side of this beer in the centre of the palate is nicely done. But yeah, on the border region between the middle third and back third of your palate, you've got, you can feel a little bit of a thicker kind of doughy sort of quality. There's a little bit of a more kind of bready sort of thing there. There's a little bit of another kind of grainy, toasty element to it. And then on the back of that front third of your on the back of the back third of your palate, you can get more of a kind of toasty. You get more of a toasty, bread crusty kind of thing coming out of it as well. But you can feel the sort of fluffiness almost of the yeast in the back of the palate there as well. There's a bit of you can feel a little bit of a grainy toastiness underneath, but then you can feel the yeasty notes coming out of this beer as well. I think the yeast is actually playing quite a big role in this one, but as I've been saying in reviews quite often recently, the back third of your palate feels quite sort of fluffy almost and just a little bit thicker, but then as you move forward it gradually kind of condenses down. As you reach that border region it goes down like this, and then as you move into that middle third of your palate it just feels a little bit more condensed, and you've got all those bready, oaty, bread crusty sort of flavours that I was talking about earlier. So yeah, the middle of the palate in this beer I think is really nicely done. So yeah, it goes together really nicely in that sense. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, let's focus on that. Yeah, on the hoppy side of things, in the back corners of your palate you've got a nice kind of earthy quality in there, which will be coming both from Columbus, and I think, you know, Chinook is going to give you a little bit of that as well. But as you move further forward you've got this nice kind of duality almost. You've got the deeper kind of piney resinous notes from the Chinook coming out there, and you've got a bit of that spicy floral aromatic note coming out too, but it kind of intensifies as you move further forward. Round the front curve of the palate you've got a nice little bit of a kind of lighter grassy element to the beer. There's a little bit of a citrusy kind of note to it as well, but yeah, that side of the beer comes out very nicely. It's got a good green component to it, which I think balances it out quite well. But let's focus on the fruity side of things then, just to round off the tasting section. So on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a kind of thicker bready note there and a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of thing. But the basis of that front third of your palate is there's a bit of toasty bread crust under there, but there's also a bit of the kind of brown bready notey smoothness there, and then the fruits kind of sit on top of that. So let's just examine these fruity notes. So yeah, the fruity notes are kind of similar to what I expected from the aroma. You don't get so much of a raisiny sharpness out of this one, and the plums don't actually feel, there is a little bit of a kind of juicy plum in there, but it's not overly intense. So maybe there's a teeny bit of raisiny sharpness and a wee bit of a juicy plum at the back of the front third of your palate, but you know, overwhelmingly as you move further forward it gets a light sort of figgy quality out of it, and I really like that. As you kind of move further forward on this one, but as you reach the kind of front half of that front third of the palate, you've got a really nice kind of softer blackcurranty vibe out of it, and then you get a little bit of a more juicy blackberry coming off the front of the tongue too. So I really like how that side of things goes together. I mean, the fruity side of the beer is pretty nice. It is all about these kind of berry sort of curranty sort of fruits. You do get a wee touch of the mango. And the further you go into the aftertaste, almost right in the centre of that front third of your tongue, you do get a little touch of the mango from the citra in there. But yeah, it's quite a soft fruity note actually. It gets a little bit more juicy the more you drink of it. But it's definitely a sort of berry curranty type vibe that you get out of this one. But yeah, I think that summarises the flavour of this beer quite nicely, to be honest with you. I think we've covered it quite in depth. So yeah, let's round off this review with a look at the mouthfeel then. This beer is definitely mid-bodied. It's right in the middle of the spectrum, no doubt about that. The carbonation is very, very smooth, and I would say that overall this beer has a bit of a slickness to it. It's got a wee bit of a kind of oily quality as well, which I think suits the black IPA. So a mix of smooth, slick and oily, if you like. It does build in bitterness a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste. In terms of hoppy bitterness, this one isn't too high. This is maybe about 40 IBUs or 50 IBUs, but the malty side of things does add a little bit to that. You do get a little bit of bitterness in the middle third of your palate, but also in the kind of hoppy side of things. So I can appreciate how that comes out in the beer there. But yeah, malty yeah, on the malty side of things, bit of toast, bit of kind of bitterness underneath, a bit of smoothness and nice breadiness on top, and a wee bit of sweetness coming out of the beer a little bit later on. As I say, I think about 40 or 50 IBUs in this one. Then you've got some nice kind of juicy, fruity qualities in there too. But I mean, overall, it's a really nice tasting beer, this one. I like the smoothness of it, and maybe this is a new side to the black IPA that we haven't seen before. So yeah, a very good first effort at a black IPA from Stigbergets, and I look forward to seeing if they put more of these out over the next little while. But yeah, have a go at this one for yourself and see what you think. Really nice drinkable beer, this. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets Bryggeri. We will no doubt return to these guys sometime soon. Do give me some other black IPA recommendations. You'll see another 2, black IPA reviews coming up very, very soon. But yeah, in the meantime, this one was the Batcat 7% black IPA from Stigbergets Bryggeri up in Gothenburg on the Swedish west coast. Thanks again for watching. It's Slanja just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Slanja, skål, cheers, and see you in the next review.